roguelite games are fun due to the level of difficulty, which makes completing a run very satisfying, and the endless replayability is wallet-friendly as well, so here are the best action roguelites, including top-down, platformers, first-person shooters, and a surprise or two. So let's begin with Wizard of Legend, a spell-slinging dungeon crawler where you participate in the
Chaos
trials, where successful contestants earn the right to become a Wizard of Legend. Combat in this game is insanely fast, with a huge number of arcanas or spells at your disposal, which you can mix and match, and while the pixel art isn't the most mind-blowing, it does work for this game, also having co-op support and a fun progression system, where at this point in time, I would recommend the original over its sequel, which is currently in Steam Early Access. An all-time classic indie game is Nuclear Throne, going all the way back to 2015 and was a PS Vita title, so how's that for a throwback, where this all-action, post-apocalyptic action roguelite was the title that popularized Screen Shake, having a storied history as well, coming to us from Dutch developer duo Vlambeer, where it still remains fun with excellent pixel art, but might be beginning to show its age, especially if you're more accustomed to modern roguelites and their progression systems, but it often goes on sale, so pick it up then to try. This video is brought to you by 13Z The Zodiac Trials, an action-packed third-person hack-and-slash roguelite where you battle through the Celestial Trials to claim the title of the 13th Zodiac Guardian. Right now, the game is running a brand new playtest on Steam, introducing a second playable character, the Raven, alongside the Fox from the first playtest, which, by the way, was very well received. 13Z delivers buttery smooth combat, gorgeous art and intense battles against creatures inspired by Eastern mythology.
Chaos.
The final game will feature co-op for 2 to 4 players and 4 playable characters, but for now, you can dive in with the two, testing out different builds, upgrades and challenges. The devs are constantly updating the playtest build based on community feedback, so now's the perfect time to jump in, try it out and make your voice heard. Head over to their Steam page, wishlist the game, and grab access to the playtest today. Our first unconventional action roguelite is One Step from Eden, essentially roguelite Mega Man Battle Network, which combines grid-based combat with deck-building elements. You go on a run, battling random combinations of enemies and bosses, choosing your upgrades carefully, learning the movement and attack patterns of these foes, and in turn, moving, dodging and attacking in order to be victorious. There are various spells and artifacts to collect, allowing you to customize your deck and fine-tune your combat style with a bunch of different unique playable characters as well on your road to Eden. But don't let the grid fool you, this is one of the fastest paced action titles that requires you to think on your feet. Another unconventional action roguelite title is Dome Keeper, being a roguelite mining defense game where you have to safeguard a glass dome against relentless waves of enemies on an alien planet. Between these assaults, descend beneath the surface to mine essential resources which are crucial for upgrades, having to physically lug these back to your base to cash them in. Your upgrades range from making you more effective at mining to improving the power of your defenses, and it's a weighty decision to make every time, which adds to its fun. While this was a little bare bones at launch in 2022, despite not being an early access release, the developers have released multiple free content updates which includes new characters, new modes and more, and I would consider this to be a pioneer that created a subgenre of its own. Back to a more classic 3/4 view action roguelite, but one which you might not be familiar with, despite it having 33,000 Steam reviews, since Warm Snow is from a Chinese developer and draws upon Eastern mythology. If you're only exposed to mainstream or Western indie games, you might have overlooked this, but trust me on this one, it's a great title, both in terms of visuals and gameplay. Variety comes in the form of relics and swords, together with an extensive permanent progression talent tree, allowing you to make progress on every run, with the theme being awesome, so do not sleep on this one. It's crossover city with this title, since the pixel art roguelite platformer Astral Ascent made waves in 2023, in which you battle physical manifestations of the Zodiac signs. Think Leo, Sagittarius, Scorpio and more. in order to fight your way out of a mystical prison known as the Garden. There are 4 playable heroes in the base game, each with distinct personalities and abilities, having weapon variants and essentially different forms, which provides plenty of variety, in addition to the rich array of spells and upgrades. There is a narrative element where as you delve deeper into the Garden, you will uncover fragments of the heroes' backstories, gradually revealing the overarching narrative. And it's a great looking pixel art title, at least in cutscenes, portraits and backgrounds. There is crossover content with Dead Cells and Children of Mortar, and support is ongoing with a new DLC and major free update to launch in April as part of Update 2.0, and they're looking at 2.1 and beyond looking like a labour of love. Our first roguelite first-person shooter is Gunfire Reborn, an all-action title that has a bit of a Borderlands vibe to it, but draws upon Eastern mythology where you play as anthropomorphic animals. Post-release in 2021, the developers have been adding a bunch of new characters as DLC, currently sitting at 12 heroes, each with unique abilities and designs. You are exploring procedurally generated levels filled with diverse enemies and challenging bosses, with the weapon variety here being very impressive, along with over 100 gameplay affecting items like scrolls, which gives you even more options on how you want to play and is still sustaining a very strong player base to this day. One of my personal favourite roguelites is Downwell, a minimalist platformer where your protagonist is, well, falling down a well. To help him, he has powerful gun boots, which, as indicated by the name, are boots with guns built into them, and fire downwards, having to land on solid ground or on an enemy to recharge said ammo. You can collect red gems to purchase items, upgrade weapons or enhance abilities in the shop and between levels, and is a pick up and play kind of game which is very easy to get into while still retaining a lot of depth. I do love the minimalist black, white and red colour scheme, and its base price is just $3 and is a must get for fans of the genre. A newer entry from 2024 is Rabbit and Steel, a co-op action roguelite that aims to recreate the combat portion of a high-level MMO raid, pointing towards Final Fantasy XIV in particular. Team up with up to 3 friends, select from various classes, and engage in raid boss battles reminiscent of traditional MMORPGs, with damage area indications and attack cones being prominently displayed. So it's a frantic scramble to get out of the way while still playing your role, such as healing teammates or to launch attacks of your own. Key to all of this is global cooldowns, effective skill usage and gear effects, and of course, teamwork is of the utmost importance, but this is surprisingly well balanced even if you are playing solo, and is still worth picking up and is one of the best games of 2024. Speaking of 2024, that was also the 1.0 release of Nova Drift, one of the indie games that was in early access for what seemed like forever, with the developer being happy to continually add more and more and more to the game until they themselves were satisfied. You pilot an ever-evolving biomechanical ship through treacherous space, merging classic arcade shooting, think asteroids, with modern action RPG elements. As you vanquish foes, your vessel rapidly transforms, allowing you to craft unique builds, offering many choices for weapons, shields and body gear, resulting in a near infinite number of possible builds and combinations to discover. There are melee weapons like swords, long-ranged ones like missiles and lasers, or even a build where you do more damage by ramming into enemies, with the experimentation and mixing and matching of parts being the fun in this game. This build crafting makes it such that each playthrough offers something fresh, which is in addition to a variety of game modes like Draft, Metamorphosis, Endless and more, being a must-play game in my opinion. It's always a challenge when it comes to indie roguelites, since a couple of these have sequels where the newer entry is not necessarily better, so I would lean towards the original Spelunky in this case. Of note due to its historical significance, since this could have been the first game to coin the term roguelite, L-I-T-E. Developer Derek Yu, aka Mossmouth, is legendary in the indie game scene and went for the more specific term since this is not a game like the original Rogue, but one that borrows some elements from it, a light version so to speak, leading to endless confusion in the years since then. What you need to know is that this is a tough as nails platformer in which you play as an Indiana Jones looking character delving into the underground in search of fame and fortune. Everything in this game is punishing since spikes are instant death for example, and enemies have attacks that can stun you, followed up with a swift push and into the spikes you go and it's run over. However, as you bang your head against this game, you will eventually learn more about enemy behavior and how items interact with them and the environment, really offering that chance for you to master a game when you beat it, and to then go for the tougher, optional secret challenges that speedrunners love and is one of the all-time greats. The release of Vampire Survivors did see the creation of a subgenre which I would dub the Bullet Heaven roguelite, where instead of enemies spamming projectiles at you which you need to avoid, like in a bullet hell shoot 'em up, you are instead the one generating said projectiles, becoming the bullet hell so to speak, which is countered by the absolute swarms of enemies that the game throws at you. Everyone has their favourite entry in this subgenre, with the Diablo 1 looking Halls of Torment speaking to me, in part due to the retro-inspired pre-rendered art style, but also the core action, theme and combat. There are a massive number of playable characters, each with their own objectives to complete, being a checkbox kind of game if I ever saw one, and, no insult, is a great podcast game. A title perhaps infamous in the roguelite community is Dead Estate, in particular due to the character design of the witch Cordelia, who serves as a vendor in the game, but titillation aside, this isometric action roguelite with a tinge of horror is awesome. You are trapped in a monster-filled mansion, battling through randomly generated floors teeming with grotesque creatures, with a choice of 10 playable characters, each with their own distinct abilities and playstyles. As you ascend the mansion floors, you collect a variety of weapons and items, enhancing your combat capabilities and giving you more strategic options. At release in 2021, the developers came up with the ambitious roadmap of 6 free content updates, which was completed in October 2024 with no further plans to add content, so it is complete so to speak, making it a great time to pick it up, and I'll be very curious to see what's next from this team. We just had the official launch of Star of Providence on Switch, which was in conjunction with new publisher Big Mode, and coinciding with that is an update titled Into Oblivion for the game formerly known as Monolith. Back in 2017, when this channel was still new, I made a video on this very game and loved it, so it's a great time to go back, being a room-based title with bullet hell combat and plenty of secrets to uncover, where I may just revisit this game, so let me know if you want to see a more gameplay-focused series on roguelites. An amazing success story out of South Korea is Skul the Hero Slayer, where based on what I know, this game started off as a student project during university, but even then, it took off and they were able to create a company and become full-time game developers straight out of uni due to the success of this title. So who says the indie dev dream is dead? This is a pixel art roguelite platformer in which you play as a lowly skeleton warrior on a quest to rescue his kidnapped king and comrades from invading human heroes. The main gimmick here is the ability to swap skulls with those of defeated enemies, granting him new abilities and changing his visual form, including multiple levels of said form, where these are not just limited to run-of-the-mill fantasy classes like warrior or archer, but instead Rockstar, Grim Reaper, Beowulf, Genie and more are all fair game, having over 100 of these which are fun to discover, and they have released one paid DLC titled Mythology Pack, which is described as their first, so I'm presuming more are coming and looks like a decent amount of content. A very popular title that is on the edge of being a roguelite is Cult of the Lamb, where it does have procedurally generated dungeons, but combat is on the easier side, and they do seem to be more focused on the base building cult management aspect. which explains its position on the list. You play as a lamb saved by death by an ominous stranger known as the One Who Waits, and in order to repay your debt, the lamb must build a loyal cult in his name, venture into diverse and mysterious regions to gather resources, battle enemies, and recruit new followers to expand the cult, mixing dungeon crawling action with the management layer, with a larger structure of having to defeat the 4 bishops of the old faith to free your savior. It has some dark themes contrasted with the very adorable presentation, and post-launch, they have released a bunch of free updates including Relics of the Past, Sins of the Flesh, and Unholy Alliance, which added 2-player co-op as well as the usual more of everything, and is an absolute juggernaut in the indie game space. Technically, Crypt of the Necrodancer is a traditional turn-based, grid-based roguelike, but of course, the innovation here is that it mixes it with a rhythm game, where you have to tap the movement keys to the beat of the song, essentially forcing the action and turning it into a real-time title. Similarly, you descend into procedurally generated levels, choosing from unique playable characters with special abilities, with the music theme bleeding over into everything from the visuals, naming of enemies, and even boss designs. This is one of my favourite roguelites of all time since I love the rhythm aspect, and remember people setting up DDR dance pads to play this back in the day, where they released a DLC titled Amplified in 2017 and then went quiet, but then dropped the Synchrony DLC in 2024 out of nowhere, and later a Hatsune Miku character DLC, so there's plenty of new content if you've not checked back in with this unique title. If you are familiar with my story, you will know that the original Rogue Legacy was the game that got me into indie games all those many years ago, which led to this YouTube channel being created, so I have plenty of thanks to give to developer Celador Games, so imagine my delight when Rogue Legacy 2 was announced. Similar to the first game, this is a genealogical roguelite platformer where you play as successive members of a family of heroes, each with traits and abilities selected from a random pool. So you can get a colorblind giant barbarian in one run, only to switch to a tiny archer with IBS in the next, with this sequel adding even more classes and traits. The original was confined to more indoors style locations, with this sequel expanding the level design, which some people have said is not to their liking, but is something different to wrap your head around, which I appreciate. While this looks like a hand-drawn 2D title, the developer did show the behind the scenes and revealed that these are actually 3D models, allowing them to do interesting things with the visuals, and is an absolute delight. The original Risk of Rain was a smash hit, and developer Hopu Games made the transition to 3D far better than how Sonic Team handled it, which is impressive for a small team, where I was skeptical when Risk of Rain 2 was announced, but they managed to blow everyone out of the water with this game. It's a co-op focused roguelite 3D platformer, which you don't see every day, although we are beginning to see more new entrants featuring a wide variety of unique playable characters with a ton of variety in gameplay. You are battling increasingly formidable enemies while searching for a teleporter to progress to the next level to get to the final boss, with the difficulty ramping up as the game progresses. Do note that the developers sold the IP to Gearbox, who straight up turned around and said that they were making a mobile gacha game, while Hopu Games themselves are now employees at Valve, but what a story this team has. Speaking of all-star teams, the developers that worked on Noita previously worked on games like The Swapper, Crayon Physics Deluxe, and Baba Is You, coming together to make one of the most ambitious roguelite platformers, since the gimmick here is that every pixel is simulated in this game, which allows for dynamic interactions and environments. Applying physics simulation to this is very impressive, since you not only have liquid physics, but that applies to lava as well as explosive gas, where igniting such a gas can cause an explosion and for the ceiling to collapse. Adding to the complexity are the enemies and their behavior, also seen in games like Spelunky, since they are not immune to the simulation and physics of the world. Impressively, the rabbit hole goes deep in this game, which has to do with digging, but I'll leave it at that for now and for you to explore. It is one of the most impressive titles to come along. Indie games are often the gift that keeps on giving, since with a decent enough hit and a small team, the revenue generated from one game can sustain developers for quite a while without them having to resort to selling DLCs, microtransactions, battle passes, or quickly turning around and chasing sequel success. A textbook example of which is Enter the Gungeon, an action roguelite with bullet hell combat absolutely filled with gun puns, from the title Gungeon instead of dungeon, to bullet-shaped enemies, to boss names like the Ammo Conda and more, not to mention the hundreds of available guns that you can use, including a gun which shoots out other guns. This was a hit right out of the gate, with the developers then releasing 3 free significant content updates, including Supply Drop, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, as well as A Farewell to Arms, a strategy seen in other roguelites like Dead Estate mentioned earlier. The core story for each character is to obtain a gun that will kill the past, with very unique characters as well, and is truly one of the all-time greats. Genre or sub-genre defining games are always worth a mention, since these games become so popular that they spawned a bunch of clones, some of which were very successful in their own right, but none quite reaching the same heights as the original, and such is the case with Vampire Survivors, the bullet heaven roguelite that figured out the dopamine hit of slaughtering enemies by the thousands with screen-filling attacks, kept players coming back for more, weaponizing slot machine design, but I suppose not in as nefarious a way as the casinos do. They have continued to add free updates and DLC, including the Castlevania crossover that people have been asking for, which finally added vampires to the game, with more to come in their Chaos roadmap in 2025 and beyond. Of course, when it comes to roguelites, the game that has to be mentioned is The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, the remake of a Flash game that was the icon for early YouTube gaming, since the sheer amount of randomness and replayability meant near infinite content for creators, with Let's Play series going into the thousands of episodes. It has a religious theme where you play as Isaac, a little boy whose mother hears the voice of God, which compels her to kill her son, so he runs into the basement to try to escape, encountering all sorts of horrors within. I'll admit, this game did not click with me on the first try, since everything was so confusing, and it was literally trial and error to figure things out, which was helped greatly by the mod that actually told you what items do, so I was able to appreciate the game more after that, instead of having to have Platinum God open on a second screen, with many DLCs and free updates, including Repentance Plus in 2024, which added co-op support. Something a little more accessible is Dead Cells, a roguelite platformer, which players should be more comfortable with, since platforming is a core part of video games, at least if you grew up in the 80s and 90s. I remember getting access to this game in early access way back when, and even then realized that it was special, but did not comprehend how huge it would get. You play as the Prisoner, an amorphous blob creature which takes control of the beheaded, using the body to battle enemies, having a blueprint progression system with collected cells in every run used to unlock more weapons and equipment. It self-describes as a roguevania, which is a term which hasn't really caught on, manifesting in the form of skill unlocks, which allow you to access different routes, similar to a Metroidvania but with the run-based structure, and as some of the best feeling combat ever. I'm a Supergiant fanboy, so it should be no surprise that the godlike roguelite Hades is my favourite, the rightful game of the year 2020, where you play as Zagreus, son of Hades, as he attempts to escape the underworld, with awesome combat, excellent music and voice acting, as well as the standard when it comes to roguelite storytelling, although the criticism was that there could have been more variety from run to run, which is being addressed in Hades 2, but for now, this gets top billing. Watch this video for more of the best indie games.